everybody, this is Going Public. I'm Harry McCullough. Tonight's topic, the National Flood Insurance Program, the Risk Rating 2.0. You've heard a lot about it, and it is happening now. The Executive Director of the North Lafourche Levee District, Dwayne Bourgeois, is here. Thanks so much to try and unravel a little bit about this, which is so important for all our areas, anywhere below I-12, I guess.
Yeah.
We'd been hearing about the new flood rates, and a couple of years ago there were certain things that went up $28,000 some areas. They were able to get it back, and now we got a new thing from FEMA, a new risk rating 2.0. Explain what this is now and why it's happening now. It's not going to get kicked down the road anytime soon.
Yeah, well, risk rating 2.0 is just a rating methodology that FEMA is using to set the rates for the National Flood Insurance Program. It's a brand new setting. And one of the things that we were talking about briefly before was that, a lot of people trying to make decisions right now. It's tough times, especially in our area. You say everything south of I-12, but everything up the river, up the eastern seaboard, West Coast. It's important across the nation, but FEMA has been trying to slide this one under the wire. And I'm going to back up a little bit and just talk in terms of the flood insurance program itself, because this may not be a problem if Congress doesn't do something by December 3rd, when the whole program would be shut down, because it's just had a short-term continuing reauthorization with the continuing resolution for the budget. In all likelihood, they're going to kick the program into next year sometime, and there's been some effort to make some pretty good improvements to the program itself, but in the meantime, Risk Rating 2.0 is something that FEMA has developed on their own, pretty much in a vacuum from our concern. They went out and told a lot of folks what they said it's going to be in there, but if you've seen some of the stuff they've produced, it's been in terms of, well, this number of people are going to see a decrease, and this number of people are going to see a increase from so many dollars to so many dollars a month, and it needs from this many to this month. In Louisiana, it's clearly 80% of the policyholders are going to see an increase in their flood insurance. And the fact that they report it on a monthly basis is a bit disingenuous to me. It's also disingenuous that they act like that's the only thing there. It's going to continue to go up. We're talking about the program itself is statutorily limited to an increase in rate at 18% a year. And it doesn't really matter if it's 9% or 18%, it doesn't help the affordability, the fact that it'll go up incrementally. And Risk Rating 2.0 is really just that. It's a new approach to how they rate things. I guess there's some benefits to it. They've labeled it equity in action, and there's probably some things that are equitable. The problem is we really don't know enough about it, even though it is in place now for new policyholders. When it's effect October 1st, for people renewing, it'll be April 1st of 2022.
So, yeah, they're trying to make, the whole program solvent, and they wanted to pay for itself. Although there's nothing else in Washington, it seems like it pays for itself. but yeah, real important for you, what you said was that we got roughly 400,000 people with flood insurance in Louisiana. 80% of those folks will see a raise.
Yeah, actually,
and
500,000.
Yeah,
80% would be 400,000 who will be seeing an increase.
An increase, and could possibly be over the next 10 years at 18% for 10 years, which doubles pretty quick.
Yeah, well, that was one of the things that, trying to get information is like pulling teeth, right? But our legislative delegation on the Senate side, on the House side, especially, Scalise and Graves, and then Kennedy and Cassidy. Senator Kennedy is on the banking committee. They had a hearing. He pressured pretty hard on David Morstad, who heads this particular part of FEMA. We were able to get some questions in for the record, and one of the things that was mentioned there was that we were looking at, we know that 80% of the people in Louisiana are going to see an increase. That becomes basically, of the 500,000 people, that's 400,000 people are going to see an increase. That's 80%. But in the letter that he wrote, he responded to say that 90% of those people will see an increase. It'll take 10 years for them to get to their maximum rate. Like that was a good thing. The problem with that is that what you're saying is that it's going to take people 10 years to get to their maximum rate because it's limited to 18% a year, and their rates increases are going to be so high. I was saying you put a number to that. Say that someone was paying $1,000 a year, and you increase that premium by 18% a year. Well, in 4 years, that premium's doubled. In 7 years, it's tripled. In 9 years, it's quadrupled. And in the 10th year, that $1,000 at 18% a year would be over $5,000. And so you're able to know that pretty early on if you can contact your insurance agent and get that information. But the person buying the house is going to know it too. And the other thing that they're doing with Risk Rating 2.0, that's the real killer for us, is they're killing grandfathering, which is never been codified. It's not law in any way, shape, or form. It's a policy that FEMA put in place to try to help sell insurance policies. But because of how they're changing their rating methodology with Risk Rating 2.0, they can't do grandfathering anymore. So everybody's going to go to their full risk rate over time.
Right. Which would be devastating, I think, for the area. And we talk about inflation now that's starting to creep back into the area. Mm-hmm. But if everybody has an extra $5,000 they got to pay for insurance, that's going to obviously add to our area being a, real estate prices, all that kind of stuff would be affected.
Yeah. FEMA doesn't see that it is their role, and they've stated this, to make the program solvent or to do anything other than care about the value of homes, right? That's something entirely different. But a lot of people don't have an option here, right? If you live in a special flood hazard area, that's an area where FEMA has determined that you have greater than a 1% annual exceedance probability of having a flood, so the 100-year flood as you hear it, and you have a federally backed mortgage, so backed in any way by the federal government, which is pretty much all the mortgages you can get unless you borrow money from a friend, then you're going to have to purchase flood insurance. So you don't have an option there. The grandfathering process that FEMA used to do was that if you built to the elevation that was required, the base flood elevation that was required at the time that you built your home, or your home was naturally above that base flood elevation, you could buy insurance, and you could continue to buy insurance at that rate, even if your property all of a sudden found itself at a higher base flood elevation, so you're below the base flood elevation. And further, you could sell your policy when you sell your home. Basically, the new homeowner could buy it and continue at the rate. That preserved the value of the home. And Biggert-Waters 2012 basically had a clause that killed grandfathering and then changed the process by which FEMA calculated the maximum rates. So Homeowners Flood Insurance Affordability Act in 2014 reversed the killing of the grandfathering and kind of spread things out in time, but we've never done anything to reduce the rates back down. And you mentioned another thing that boggles my mind is why we're even talking about this. FEMA has said that over the 50-year life of the program, it has collected $60 billion in premiums, revenues, but has paid out $90 billion in claims, 96 billion. So the program is $36 billion in arrears to the federal treasury. Yet the program has, by FEMA's estimates, saved the federal government like $1.67 billion a year over the life of the program. So why are we even talking about this? How many programs, federal programs, have costed the federal government $36 billion a year, wherein the benefactors of the program have paid so much, with interest no less, over the course of the program?
Right. No, it's without a doubt. It's with flood insurance. I mean, when they have fires in the West, do they have fire insurance from FEMA? I don't know.
No,
I don't know the answer to that.
It's still handled through most of the private sector.
Right.
And a lot of this is a push towards the private sector, because you would think that the private sector could do this
Shop it
more
like
efficiently,
anything else,
right? And but as long as the rates were being held as part of a program and considered part of that quid pro quo, because you can't be in the program unless you adopt their maps for floodplain management in a community. So we're having a disconnect between what's the program, National Flood Insurance Program, and just insurance, right? I'm for the private sector being there, and there's plenty of places they can be there, and there's things that they can add to the existing policies. But if the market wasn't allow you to afford it, then that's the problem. And I think that there's a general push here that the rates one pays for flood insurance should reflect the risk, therefore sending a price signal to where you should and shouldn't live. Maybe that's true for new construction, but what about the person who's played by the rules, bought insurance, maintained insurance, and now finds themselves at no fault of their own at a higher rate?
Yeah, that's a real, that's ramifications down the road for sure. And like I say, to have a mortgage, then they back it and they make you pay that. It seems like they got their foot on the scale a little bit. So
right.
we'll take a break. When we come back, more with Dwayne Bourgeois right here on Going Public.
A new company with a lot of history. GIS Engineering has rapidly grown its brand around an experienced team of professionals. GIS Engineering is a full-service planning, engineering, procurement, and construction management company specializing in coastal protection and restoration, upstream and downstream industrial, and transportation infrastructure projects. Putting people first, GIS Engineering, a new company with a lot of history.
In South Louisiana, storms are a way of life. Every storm poses a different threat, whether from flooding or hurricane-force winds. At All South Consulting Engineers, we help protect our people from these disasters. Before a storm, we work with our leaders to prevent catastrophic damage. After the storm, we help get the resources needed for rebuilding. We have helped our cities, parishes, and school boards recover over $2 billion to rebuild our community. We'll be here for the next one.
Cardiovascular Institute of the South's Ambulatory Surgery Center offers patients advanced and innovative outpatient procedures using the latest technology and treatment options. The first of its kind in the region, this center provides our patients and their families with high-quality care in a convenient, comfortable, and safe environment at a lower cost. Trust your care to the cardiovascular care team you know and love at CIS. Learn more at cardio.com.
There are many strengths in our cancer center. I think one of the biggest is patients don't have to go elsewhere to get technology for their diagnosis and treatment of their cancer. Our treatment machine, the linear accelerator, allows us to pinpoint and treat cancers with more accuracy than ever was possible before. Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center provides leading-edge technology with the highest quality care and the best treatment options unique to each patient.
A new company with a lot of history. GIS Engineering has rapidly grown its brand around an experienced team of professionals. GIS Engineering is a full-service planning, engineering, procurement, and construction management company specializing in coastal protection and restoration, upstream and downstream industrial, and transportation infrastructure projects. Putting people first, GIS Engineering, a new company with a lot of history.
Everybody, welcome back to the show. Harry McCullough here. We're talking with North Lafourche Levee District Executive Director Dwayne Bourgeois. Dwayne, thanks so much for being with us. Sure. We're talking about the flood insurance program and the risk rating 2.0. As everything starts going, the flood maps are a big part of what we're trying to do too. Obviously, if you're not in a flood zone or you are in a flood zone, your ratings can be different with flood insurance. Building houses, you know, guys that are home builders, trying to develop different things. All of this goes into what people are trying to plan going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, in Lafourche and in Terrebonne, we were part of I guess you'll call it a pilot program called a LAMP, a Levee Analysis Mapping Procedure, which was a method by which FEMA was going to attempt in their flood insurance study process where they're building the maps out to give some credit to non-accredited levees. Now, a levee that's accredited, like the levees around New Orleans and how South Lafourche levees used to be, when they were federal levees, have met a certain building criteria found in 44 CFR 6510. So it's a statutory requirement. If you built to that standard, it's fine. The way that they used to do maps is they used to basically say that, well, if the levees that were there were accredited, then you considered them in the floodplain study, flood insurance study. If they weren't, you pretended like they weren't there. And that was totally nonsensical. So we had a lot of pushback on that because it doesn't, the water is not going to check to see if a levee is accredited or not before it does anything to it, right? So we pushed back on that and through Congress, and they told then Administrator Fugate, you need to change this process. And they developed this whole levee analysis mapping procedure, and Terrebonne and Lafourche were one of 5 Louisiana parishes that were part of the pilot, 25 nationally were part of the pilot, and we started to get some information back on our maps and what have you. And it looked reasonable. It was a better approach in some regards. There were still some errors with it and what have you, but we're getting some of our preliminary maps back, and we've got still some things to work out. And then all of a sudden we get risk rating 2.0. And, you know, in risk rating 2.0, they're saying that the rates you'll pay are based off of an entirely different process, in that it used to be that you had this base flood elevation. If you were above the base flood elevation, then you were part of a rate pool that was classified inside of FEMA, or a group, a rate group, where you were all across the nation, a bunch of policyholders are going to pay the same amount if you were 1 foot above the base flood elevation. And if you were 2 feet, you were part of another group, and you would pay that amount. But they've done away with all of that in risk rating 2.0. They're using an entire different risk-based model to project what the risk of flooding is. In essence, through what we were able to discern from the documentation that they put out, they do basically numerical models to determine the hazard possibility in a geographic area that's either a hydrologic unit code or an area behind levees. And then they do some, well, if that does happen, what kind of damage would you expect, and some financial models to say what that would cost, and that becomes their annual loss. And so everything is, as far as the rate classes, it's out the window. And with some of the home builders associations, Congressman Scalise brought a group of people together, and they were livid because they're just catching up to some of the things now. You know, it was one thing in the old rating structure where they could say, okay, well, we bought this subdivision property, we're going to build a subdivision. We can see right now that if we turn it in at this elevation, it's going to be $5,000 a year. So they're asking, okay, what can we do to fix it? In the old world, you added another foot or two of material, and then the houses started that much higher, and then you had a $500 a year policy. Right. But what they're finding right now is, okay, well, if we add 2 feet, what's it going to be? $4,900. You know, it doesn't change. The rate is tied to this other statistical models, and at least from my point of view, it seems like social engineering. They're trying to say where people should and shouldn't live, which is what a lot of people were saying in those hearings, that yes, the rates should reflect the risk, and fine if that's true for new properties, but here you have fresh dirt and they can't find out to what elevation that they should build to get a reasonable price, and it's causing a lot of calamity.
Well, sure. I mean, you would fix it, right? They could just keep building it higher if they
Right.
needed to or whatever. And that's real important when you're talking about that for when they change the rules in the midstream like that.
Right.
And so yeah, anybody used to have when they throw away the grandfather clause in there too. So that's different. So where do we go from here, and what's the next step?
Well, we've got some friends that are paying attention to this. Again, our legislative delegation, Kennedy and Cassidy over on the Senate side, Graves and Scalise over on the House side, definitely involved in this, as is Letlow and others. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from those other folks. They've always been with us in line. But in Louisiana, we're kind of an outlier. We've had some friends over in Texas. Here you got the Fort Bend levee district over in Sugar Land, Texas. Those guys have spent millions and millions of dollars to tax themselves, built levees, and now they're not and to the point where they didn't only build 100-year protection, they built 500-year protection, and they've got no proof that FEMA is going to recognize their levees at all. Because in this whole levee world, they did not describe how they were going to do it. They said that they had a report coming from the Corps that they used. When we asked the Corps for that report, the Corps said there's no such report. And then when we pressed further, they said, well, it was a levee safety program. And that was done by the Corps for a whole different set of reasons. In our world, there's the flood risk, there's the big clump of dirt called the levee, and there's whatever's behind the levee. So if your levee has 6 foot of freeboard from what the maximum flood would be to the maximum height of the levee, you might have 2 situations just like that, and the Corps is trying to figure out where they're going to spend their money. From a risk point of view, they might have $100 million worth of structures and things over here, and then another one, they'll have $1 billion. So from a prioritization tool point of view, that was what this thing was for. But it was never intended to do an analysis of the health of a levee, health of a pile of dirt that doesn't know what's protecting it.
Right. Are they putting in insurance claims? We were talking to Joe Ogeron earlier, and they were saying, in the South Lafourche, I guess they were having less claims in there. We've had a couple of storms that have come through here that normally would have flooded people, and now they're seeing a lack of claims in those areas, which means those levees are working.
Right. South Lafourche's levees were not accredited, but to Windows' credit, he kept putting dirt on it in spite of the Corps saying, oh, it's not authorized for those heights. He put dirt on it, and in the end, when it was tested by HIDA, it survived, right? We had flooding in our areas. We had flooding that overwhelmed the level of protection that we had, but we're 30 years behind Windows system as far as the North Lafourche area is doing it. So the levees do make a difference. They should be recognized, and they're not totally being recognized. And so there's layers of problems with this. Going back to your original question, our congressmen have written letters. The governor has written a letter to Griswold. Diane Griswold, the administrator for FEMA. The Association of Levee Boards is trying to take it to the next level, and the executive committee voted unanimously to ask the state's attorney general to see if there was anything we could do from a legal point of view, because this thing was not developed, Risk Rating 2.0 was not developed using Administrative Procedures Act and other things that would have disclosed things. I mean, FEMA says that they had outreach and they told people what they were doing, but they never told people how they were doing it. And then they finally just start publishing rates.
Is anybody pushing this on the other side? I mean, is it just the bureaucracy, a FEMA person, or is there some states that are going, we're tired of paying for Louisiana?
Well, there is that, right? And it sounds good when you say it fast that the rate of the cost of insurance should reflect the risk. But when you're considering a 30-year life of a loan, it's like, I have a whole life policy, right? I paid a high amount when my risk was younger. I'm still paying the same amount now.
Right.
It's like, the insurance company came in and said, well, Mr. Bourgeois, you're a little
did
bit
it
old
now,
now.
right.
We're going to have to increase your rates because your risk is higher. It's not, it just doesn't make sense. You have to look there. And these agencies are also stovepiped, that FEMA doesn't even regulate the lending institutions and who's in the program and not in the program. And it's a mess. But there's room for the private sector to be in, and they are getting in, but it doesn't look like that's going to offer any financial relief because they're not treating it like a program. They're treating it simply as an insurance product.
Right, and when you were talking about that, even in that, our insurance, executives at the state sometimes didn't know what was happening.
Right. Ms. Donnellan was in favor of NFIP's risk rating 2.0 initially. He started pushing back, and there's parts of it that make sense. The equity part is in insurance, the first 60,000 is priced cheaper than the rest, and for a low value home, that first 60 is a much higher percentage. So there's ways to balance things out, but it's a mess. Our legislators are there fighting it, and we need to keep and keep the pressure.
They're fighting it because you guys are pushing them a little bit. So we appreciate you guys being on the front line.
Thank you.
All right, thanks so much for being there. It's Dwayne Bourgeois, the North Lafourche Levee District Executive Director. Thanks for watching, everybody. That's Going Public. We'll be right back with more Bite Time.